Today's shiur begins 8 lines from the top of Daf Lamed Vov. We have a quote from that which we saw back on Daf Lamed Hey Omid Beis, and you can use the arrow that we've provided to the immediate right-hand side of the Gemara in order to navigate to find the corresponding arrow also back there on Daf Lamed Hey Omid Beis. The topic heading that we have on the side is Liyashev, to resolve Stira Pnimis, an internal contradiction bebraisa that we find in a braisa be'inyan ktana im chayeves olel knas. Do we say that a man who rapes a minor is obligated to pay the 50 shekel knas of the Torah? So now the Gemara. Hamima'enes ein lo knas velo pitui. A mima'enes is a girl under 12 years old that was married off by her mother or brother in a rabbinic marriage. That girl is not subject, if she is raped, she is not subject to receiving the knas for knas is the name of the payment for the rape, or pitui for the payment that would be made in the case of seduction. And we now infer hok tana be'alma is law. But if you were dealing with a minor in general, meaning a minor, a little girl under 12 years old that was never married to a man. So in the case of mima'enes, we assume that she's no longer a virgin. So that is the reason that there's no knas payment. The knas payment is made only for the rape of a virgin. But a ketana in general, a minor that was never married, would receive knas money, in accordance with which Tanaic opinion is that? Rabbanan he, this would be in accordance with the Rabbanan that argue with Rabbi Meir at the beginning of the parak. The Amri, the Rabbanan hold, Ketana Yesh Law Knas. Amos Seifa. Now state the continuation, the end of the source we just quoted. It says, and you'll also note that this represents a long question. The Seifa says, Eilinus Ein Law Lo Knas Velo Pitui. Now, Eilinus is a woman that doesn't reach Nara. She doesn't develop mature normally. So that she, in halachic terms, goes from the ketana category directly into the bogeres category. So until she reaches, let us say, 20 years of age, until that time, since she's not developing normally or properly, she has the status of a ketana. So when you see eilinus, you associate that with ketana. So it says in the Seifa that an eilinus does not, if she's raped, there is no knas nor pitui payment. Pitui is the payment for seduction. Well, this is in accordance with also the Rabbi Meir, and we're talking about the same Tanaic source that we quoted 3 lines above. Here's the second part of the same source that indicates that it's authored by Rabbi Meir. The Amar Ketana Ein Law Knas. Veha, an eilinus mikatnusa yatzitzola Berger. So Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that a minor does not receive a knas. Only a na'ara receives a knas. A na'ara is a girl that develops the pubic hairs at age 12, and it's a period of 6 months, 12 to 12 and a half, that she is considered a na'ara, at which time she, if raped, would be the rapist would have to pay the 50 shekel kesef of the Torah. But for a girl that's not a nara ketana, a minor, according to Rabbi Meir, there's no knas payment. And the eilinus, as is featured in this seifa of the Tanaic source, does not generate a knas payment, indicating that a ketana / eilinus is an example of a ketana, there is no knas. So now structurally we have a Tanaic source that raises the following problem. Reisha Rabbanan v'Seifa Rabbi Meir. Should we say that the source is split authored, which is throughout the Shas is something that we don't like to say. In the absence of actual names, to take an unnamed source and say it's authored by two different authors is something very uncomfortable. So that's what it appears. So should we say that that's the case over here? V'chitemon, if you try to say Kula Rebbe Meir he, that in actuality the whole source is Rebbe Meir. And that means that a ketana does not receive knas. Like the seifa would set the tone, showing us it's Rebbe Meir. And regarding the mimaenes, sovar law Rebbe Yehuda. And this is a very terse line, so we need to elaborate. We mentioned a mimaenes is a girl that is rabbinically married, and the opinion of the Rabbana, not Rebbe Yehuda, but the other opinion is that a girl up till 12 years old, if she's rabbinically married, can walk out of the marriage without even the need of a get. According to Rebbe Yehuda, the period of time entitled for a mimaenes to walk out of the marriage extends into the na'arus period. So that when you see the source saying mimaenes does not have knas, we're talking about the mimaenes, the girl that is able to walk out of the marriage during the na'arus period, according to Rebbe Yehuda, and then you would infer the mimaenes who was married and will assume there's no more virginity, so there's no knas. But a na'ara in general, notice how we're making the inference from this type of mimaenes. A mimaenes that's entered the na'arus period. She's over 12 years of age, and she could still be mimaenes. So the source says she doesn't get a knas, as we said, because she was married rabbinically to a man, hence lost the virginity. But a na'ara in general would generate the knas payment if she's raped. So that maybe the author of the source is in accordance with Rebbe Meir, and regarding the rules of mimaenes, Rebbe Meir holds like Rebbe Yehuda, enabling us to infer mimaenes no knas, but a nara would receive a knas, and that is like Rebbe Meir himself holds, that a nara generates knas and not a ketana. However, in order to say this, you have to accept this point that the Gemara said that Rebbe Meir holds like Rebbe Yehuda regarding a mimaenes. However, he doesn't. Umi sovar law, does Rebbe Meir hold like Rebbe Yehuda on mimaenes? Vatanya, you have a Tanaic source where you see an explicit controversy between the two, Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yehuda. Ad mosai habas mimaenes, until what age can a girl who's rabbinically married walk out of the marriage? Ad shetovi shtei cyrus de Rebbe Meir, until she produces the initial 2 pubic hairs, which we'll assume means until age 12. Rebbe Yehuda Omer, ad sheyarbe shochar al lavon. The literal translation is until the black is a representation of the hairs gets greater than the lavon, than the white, than the non-hairs, if you will. It means until she's older, until she reaches 12 and a half years of age. So you see from this source that Rebbe Meir and Rebbe, the reason we underline their names is to emphasize that we've been focusing on these two shitas, and you see they disagree regarding mimaenes, which we underlined. So far, we haven't made any progress. In other words, we have a brisa from Daf Lamed Hamid Beis, which indicates the Reisha authored by the Rabbanan, that a ketana in general does receive knas payment, and the Seifa that says idleness, which is associated with a ketana, no knas payment. What are we to do? So we now have a series of triangles, and on the side under the Mivneh heading, Gimel Tshuvas Shemufim Acharei Hashela. These are 3 answers that now appear after we have raised the question. Elo Rebbe Yehuda he. The source will be, we will say that the source is authored by Rebbe Yehuda, and when you read about the mimaenes, you have to realize we're saying that a mema'enes is really a representation of a nara, but was married, so she doesn't have knas, but a nara in general does receive knas. Nara, yes, and then Eilinus is a Ketana, Eilinus, no Knas. So we're going to now say Ela Rabbi Yehuda, the source is authored by Rabbi Yehuda, as we just demonstrated when we focused on the Mima'enes, being a case of Nara. Uviktana Sovelo Rabbi Meir, and regarding the din that a Ketana does not receive a Knas, Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi Meir. The Gemara asks, Umi Sovar Law, does Rabbi Yehuda hold like Rabbi Meir with regard to the Ketana? HaRav Yehonasan Berger, regarding the din of Ketana, no Knas, Rav Yehuda Marav says, Zu divrei Rabbi Meir. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. V'im Esau, if it were so that Rabbi Yehuda agrees, he should have said, Zu divrei Rabbi Meir v'Rabbi Yehuda miboy alei. He should have said that this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, but he doesn't say that. The Gemara responds, Hi Tana, the author of the Brisa that we're dealing with from Lamed Hamid Beis, that we quoted above in today's shiur, the author of this Brisa, Sovar Law Kerebi Meir Bechada, he holds like Rabbi Meir on one point, namely that Ketana, no Knas, and that's what it said, that's what the source said regarding the Eilinus, no Knas, meaning Ketana is no Knas. Upolig Olei Bechada, and disagrees with Rabbi Meir on another point regarding the Mema'enes. And regarding the Mema'enes, the author of this Brisa holds that that Miyun takes place until Yabra Shachar, or into the Narus period. So that we have we'll call it a third opinion. It's a nameless Tana, but he subscribes to Rabbi Meir regarding the issue of Tana, and doesn't agree with Rabbi Meir regarding Mema'enes. Holds like Rabbi Yehuda regarding Mema'enes, but it's not as if it's authored by two different Tanoim. It's one Tana that accepts, who collects opinions from different Tanoim on different matters. Like Rabbi Meir regarding the Tana Ein Lo Knas, and not like Rabbi Meir regarding the extent of time that a girl can be Mema'enes. Rafram Omar, my Mema'enes. Rafram has another approach. He says, what does Mema'enes, and it said in the source, Mema'enes Ein Lo Knas. What does that mean? Haru'uya L'ma'in. It's not a reference to a girl that's actually rabbinically married. It's a girl that's a minor, that she is of the age that if she would be married, rabbinically she'd be able to walk out. So Mema'enes really is a code for a Ketana, all minors. So that when it says in the source, Mema'enes Ein Lo Knas, it means, it's really like saying Ketana Ein Lo Knas. And then the Sefer talks about an Eilinus, she's a Ketana Ein Lo Knas. The Gemara asks, if that's how you're interpreting the word Mema'enes as being simply a code for a minor, Velisni Ketana, so use the simple expression Ketana. Why do you use this unusual word Mema'enes and then expect us to interpret it to mean a Ketana? Say Ketana! Kashya. Well, that's a difficulty in Rafram's approach. We continue with the Gemara, but before we do so, we glance at the side. We have a Nosei Mivneh heading. Notice the lettering. We have Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. These are Tanaic sources, Makoros, Sheyesh Bohem Stiros. Tanaic sources that seem to be contradictory. Aleph and Beis, when we see the Aleph and Beis in our Gemara, that focuses on Eilinus Yesh Lo Knas. The issue there seems to be a contradiction regarding Eilinus. Does a rape of an Eilinus generate a Knas 50 shekel kesef payment? Between sources Beis and Gimel, we will see Chareshes v'Shoita Yesh Labal Tainus Besulim Lavsidon Kesuboson. The Gemara is going to point out that to present Aleph and Beis as a contradiction and expect us to view that as a problem and that needs resolution is going to be superfluous, because the resolution is going to be so obvious. The Gemara is going to be asking, why did you even bring in sources Aleph and Beis to pose a problem when there's no problem? So the Gemara will answer, no. The reason that the source Beis was quoted was because in the discussion they wanted to show a contradiction between Beis and a third source, Gimel, so that we sort of we didn't either jumped to conclusions prematurely, or we didn't understand what the intention of the questioner was. But when we see sources Beis and then Gimel, we will notice a contradiction regarding a imbecile. It's a Shlita. Charesh is a deaf mute. If you have a girl that's a Charesh or a Shlita, and she marries a man, can the man, after he consummates the marriage with the Charesh or Shlita, can he claim that I didn't find her to be a virgin like I thought? And with that claim, he would then be mafsid. He'll cause the girl, the wife, to lose her ksuba. So now we turn to the Gemara. Eilinus ein lo knas v'lo pitui. Okay, this we saw already. We saw this quoted above. It's from the Brisa Lamed Hayomid Beis. Viromini. Now we raise a contradiction to that. The source Beis. Hareshes v'ashoyte v'ailinus yesh lohen knas v'yesh lohen tainas besulam. Number of different women are featured here. All we have to do is just navigate with the markings. The source Aleph we dashed underlined in a horizontal dash underlining. Eilen is saying no knas. In source Beis, Eilen is yes knas. And don't forget, we said just a few moments before in our previous section of Gemara that Eilen represents a ketana, a minor. So source Aleph is saying the minor no knas, and the second source saying minor does receive knas. The Gemara asks, so why? You feel there's a contradiction in Eilen? What's the contradiction? Ha Rabbi Meir, ha Rabbanan. Source Aleph is in accordance with Rabbi Meir that said that Ketana does not receive a knas. And the source Beis that indicates the ayunis which we associate with a Ketana does generate a knas payment upon her being raped. That's in accordance with the Rabbanan. In fact, udekori lo my kori lo. What did the questioner have in mind when he, after presenting source Aleph, he presented source Beis? There's obviously no contradiction here. So what was his havamina in citing source Beis? Answer: you know why he cited source Beis? Not to contrast it with source Aleph, but mishum v'islei lemirmo achriti iluya, because he had an additional source to raise as a contradiction against it, meaning the Beis source. So what's the other source that is raised as a contradiction against Beis? The Gimel source. And now our focus is not on Eilinus anymore, but on Chareishis and Shoita. It says in source Gimel, HaChareishis v'Shoita v'Habogeres u'Mukas Eitz ein lohen tainas besulim. There's a lot of detail in this source, but in Gemara markings, as I'm sure if you're not a first-time listener, you know that we want to focus on the main point that's bothering the Gemara, not necessarily in translating all of the points in the source. So in this source, you see Chareishis and Shoita. The Berger is a girl over 12 and a half. Mukasei, it's a girl that experienced impact in that part of the female anatomy. It says in this source that ein lohan tainas besulim, that if when they marry, the husband, upon discovering according to his feeling, his opinion, that she's not a virgin, he can't come to the court making such a claim and expect that to be accepted for her to lose the ksuba that a woman in general is entitled to receive. Hasum of Eilinus yesh lahen tainas besulim. A suma is a blind woman. The Eilinus is the girl we described before is not developing properly. There, the husband can he can advance the tainas besulim. Sumchus Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir Sumo Ein Lo Tainas Besulim. So you have a machlokus between the Tanakama and Rabbi Meir, quoted by Sumchus, regarding the blind woman. That will be discussed later in the Gemara. But for our purposes, let's again review the main problem. In source base, Chareshis and Shlita, when they get married, the husband, if he had assumed she is a virgin and discovers otherwise, he can make that claim in court. In other words, it's a reasonable thing for the husband to expect her to be a basula, and he will be believed if he claims that she's not. According to source Gimel, the husband would not be believed. He doesn't have the tainis psulim. And generally speaking, when we say he doesn't have that right to taina, it's either because she will be believed in her claim against, or he had no right to expect it in the first place. So there, on a superficial level, you see a contradiction. Chareshis and Shaitas, does the husband have a chance at winning his claim of I didn't find her to be a basula, and as a result cause her to lose the ksuba? Omar Rav Sheshis lo kashya HaRav Gamliel HaRav Yoshua. Very simply, source Gimel is authored by Rabbi Gamliel, where we've seen him in the first parak, where he gives believability to the woman. In other words, we listen to the woman's side over the man. Now, if we look in Rashi, toward the end of the narrow lines, he omeres, if a woman says, Mishirastani ne'nasti ne'emenes, if she claims that after I was already married, I was raped, and at the point we were married, I was a besula, and hence I deserve a 200, a full payment ksuba. She's believed. She's believed against a husband making a counterclaim that before he married her, she had lost her virginity. Hachanami, here too, Ein Lo Tainis Besulim, the phrase we saw in source Gimel that said Ein Lo Tainis Besulim, Lahafsida Ksubasa. He doesn't have, regarding her, a tainis besulim in order to cause her to lose the ksuba. The Amrinon, we say as follows: Yihave pikchis litoin havetoana mishirastani ne'anasti. If she was of sound mind, the source features a chareshis and a shaita. These are women not of sound mind, but had they been of sound mind, they would have countered the husband's claim that I found you to be not a basula by saying I was raped after I was already married. She would have been believed. So since in potential she would have been believed, because had she been of sound mind, now that she's not, he cannot cause her to lose, because her counterclaim, had it been made, would have been the winning argument. But that's in accordance with Rabbi Gamliel's approach to a husband-wife argument. And the source Beis that said the husband can put in the claim, that's in accordance with Rabbi Yeshua, who said we wouldn't believe her even if she did make the taina. Even if she did say Mishirastani Nanasti, we wouldn't rely on her. The Gemara asks, Eimar Deshamislei Ramalio Hecho de Kotano Ihi. Ramalio says we would believe her against the husband where she makes an actual claim, naming she says I was raped after I was married. Hecho de lo Kotano, where she doesn't make the claim. Here you have a deaf mute, she can't make the claim. Hecho de lo Kotano Ihi Mi Shamislei. Would we believe? Would we accept her side? She didn't make the claim. The Gemara says, yes, we will give her strength. Since Ramliel said that if she would have made the claim, if she would have been able to make the claim and made the claim, she would have been believed. Kagonzu, in a case like this where she can't make the claim, she's a deaf mute. Psach picholi ilemhu. We are to open our mouths on behalf of the mute. We're supposed to taina on their behalf. And as we said, Rav Gamliel gives believability to her argument over the man. So it's as if we're tining on her behalf. V'habogeres ein lo tainas besulim. We saw this above. In the quote, we have a little star to the immediate right-hand side of the Gemara, which you can align with the star above. The bogeres, a girl over 12 and a half, when a husband marries her and discovers her not to be a virgin, he cannot advance that as a claim to cause her to lose the ksuba. V'omar Rav bogeres noisen lo lailo rishon. Rav says that a man that marries a bogeres, means he's marrying a girl over 12 and a half, and they have their, we'll call wedding night intimacy. There is in general a fear that in the course of intimacy, if a woman sees blood from that part of her anatomy, we would be worried that maybe it's menstrual blood, it's nida, and the couple would have to cease from their intimacy. However, on the wedding night, it says, Rav says, we allow the couple to have repeat acts of intimacy, even if she is experiencing a blood flow, because we're assuming it's not menstrual blood, but rather it's blood from the breaking, from the severing of the membrane, which we call it's an injury. It's not menstrual blood originating from within the woman's reproductive constitution, but rather from the breaking of that membrane and the birth canal. That's we call the virginity. And as a result of that, that's not tomei blood. That's not blood that defiles or causes impurity, which would cause prohibition between husband and wife. And therefore, the entire night, any blood she sees, we're associating with dam besulim. But in simple terms, what that means for us is that the bogeres is assumed to have besulim there. Otherwise, if we say the besulim is not there, how could we allow this couple to have repeat acts of intimacy while she's seeing blood on that first night? So, the problem, just to repeat, before we said bogeres ein lo tainas besulim, indicating there's no expectation of any besulim to be present, and Rav says, yes, there is the presence of besulim, the virginity is present. The Gemara continues at the top of Omid Beis. If a husband would claim, I had intimacy and I didn't see any blood, that would be a claim that we would listen to. That's a claim that the husband can make, even with regard to a bogeres. The source that says bogeres ein lo tainas besulim, meaning where the husband cannot make the claim, is a case that the kotoyin. He's saying the kotoyin tainas pesach pasuach. He's saying that when I as the male did the penetration in the act of intimacy, I felt it was already open. Well, the feeling of openness means that the canal, the entry point is wide, relatively speaking. I didn't feel any resistance. Well, of course you're not going to feel any resistance in the case of a bogeres, because it expands, it opens up more just because she is maturing, she's developing, she's growing. But the besulim is actually still there. It's just open so that he feels pesach pasuch, that the opening is already opened, but it's not an indication that she had lost the virginity through prior intimacy or impact or whatever. So that if he claims that I felt it was open, we don't listen to that, and he can't through that claim that she doesn't deserve a ksuba of 200 that's deserving of a basula, of a virgin. But if he says, I didn't see any blood, the blood is expected to be seen, and if he doesn't see that, then we will take his taina seriously. He is making a real claim. And we take a look at Rashi at the top. The Hochinami means yes, in fact, he would have the right to claim the Tainis Besulim. In the case of the source, the Tanaic source that said, Bogera Seimlan Tainis Besulim, the Kotoin Tainis Pesach Pasuach. If he's tining, he's claiming that I felt it open already. And the husband said, I had intimacy and I didn't see any blood. Vadai tainim al yisli. That is a true claim. The source that says that there is no claim of tainis besulim. The kotoin v'omar, where he is saying pesach posum motzasi v'dam. And as far as the blood, I didn't check it out. I didn't pay attention whether or not there was blood, but I just felt it was open. It was an easy penetration. With regard to a marriage between a man and a minor, or a nara under 12 and a half, he is able to make such a claim, even though he can't prove it. It's just saying it's a feeling that he had at the time. Amrinon, we say he must be telling the truth, because chazok ein odom terech besudo mafsida. A man who is in the time of the Gemara was the one he is the one that sponsored, that paid for the entire lavish wedding meal. He wouldn't put himself to so much trouble just to cause it to lose it, for it to be a total loss. As a non-wedding, based on his claim that it's all off. But so if he's making the claim, it must be that he's sure of it, because otherwise, to make a false claim just to save him the ksuba money, he wouldn't do that after spending so much money for the meal. When she matures, so the rachma, the rechem, the entrance, we'll say in this case, to the woman's anatomy is not so narrow as it used to be. V'domalo ki'ilu pesach pasuach, and it appears to him, to his feelings, as if it's open. When in reality, it's not open through having been broken, it's open through having been widened, so that he can't claim that she had lost her virginity through an act of intimacy or some other reason beforehand. Sumchus Omer, we continue in the Gemara on the third line from the top. Sumchus Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir, Sumo Ein Lo Tainis Besulam, a blind woman. When she gets married, so the husband cannot claim, I didn't find the besulim which I expected. My time of the sumchis, based on what the sumchis say that, Omer Bizeru Nation Echbetis Al Gabi Karka. Because blind women fall, they experience impact, and through that impact, the besulim will be torn away, and that's why the husband will not find the besulim. So he can't claim, I thought she was a besula and she's not. The Gemara asks, Kulu nami chavuti mechbeti, all women fall at some point in their lives, and yet we say that a man can make the tainis besulim. The Gemara answers, Kulu, all other women, roy sumaris li'imon. And with regard to all other women, when they fall, if they see blood, they will run and show it to their mothers, and then it will be established, no, my daughter is no longer a basula. And if they don't inform, then they are causing a mistake on his part, and he can make the claim. He's a girl who fell and experienced bleeding over there, would have to be it would have to be announced or ruled that she's no longer a basula, and if it happened and they didn't do that, so then he has a claim. Zu, the blind girl, Eina Roya, she doesn't see. The Eina Maralimon, as a result of that, when she falls, even if there's some type of blood flow, she's not going to show it to her mother because she doesn't see it in the first place. And the husband knows all of this ahead of time. Therefore, it's not considered as if he was duped when marrying her and then discovering that she's not a basula. He should have taken that into consideration all along. Vayotzis mishum shemra ein lo knas velo pitui. The translation is a girl who had to leave her marriage because of the shame ra, the claim made by her husband that she had been with another man in intimacy. So, someone who then marries her, someone who rapes her, does not have to pay knas or pitui. The Gemara asks that this source doesn't make any sense. Hayotzis mishum shemra, a woman who has to leave the marriage because of the claim and the claim that she was in intimacy with another man. Baskila, if she had intimacy as a married woman with another man, she is to be stoned. So of course there's no payment made in the case that she's raped. Omar Rav Sheshes Hochi Ka'omar Mi sheyotza oleh shem Rabbi Aldusa. What the source is saying is not talking about a married woman that had been unfaithful and with an intimacy with another man. It's not talking about that at all. It's talking about a girl who, in her youth, had been the subject of rumors. That she was with other men, one night stands, flings. Ein lo knas velo pitui. When she is actually raped, so then the rapist will not have to pay for this kind of girl that had already been the subject of rumors. He will not have to pay knas nor pitu. Bearing in mind, once again, that knas and pitu are payments when a girl who is a virgin is raped. But a girl that was the subject of rumors, it's leading us to suspect whether she was really a virgin when the rape took place. The Rashi across from here says, Ella. Let's go back to the Gemara before we took a look at Rashi. Omar Rav Papa, Shma Mino, from what we just said, that as a result of rumors, we see that no payment is to be made. We draw the following conclusion. Rav Papa says, Shma Mino, Hai Shtora Reya, a document concerning which rumors went out that it is a forgery. Lo magvinon bay. We would not collect a malva, someone who loaned money with this shtar, claiming that this is his proof of the loan that he extended. He won't be able to collect with it. Just like the girl won't be able to collect the knas payment because of rumors concerning her. The Gemara raises a long question. And on the side under the Nosei Mivneh heading, you can see we feature a triangle, and we also indicate Shlavim. These are stages, Babir Dina Shel Rav Papa, stages in clarifying Rav Papa's law. The Shtarei Lo Magvinun BeBovel, that in Bovel we would not collect with a document concerning which there was rumors of it being a forgery. So the Gemara continues. Heichi Domi, what are the circumstances behind Rav Papa's din? Lema, we triangles. We explained the double underline that appears very shortly under the word the kavasa. We on the side of the Gemara explain hakbala. Hakbala means a parallel. Hakbala ben shem hara alo isha v'shem hara shiyotzal hashtar. When we speak about the rumors concerning the document, the veracity, the authenticity of the document, we have to parallel that with the nature of the rumor concerning the girl. So, what are the circumstances? If you're talking about a shtar concerning which there was a kol. Kol is a rumor, murmurings, literally a voice, that this is a forged document. Tekavasa hacha, the parallel case in the Tanaic source that Rav Sheshes was explaining, the parallel would be denafakala kala dezanoi, that rumors went out that she engages in harlotry. Rava says that a woman concerning whom there are rumors that she is engaged in harlotry, we don't pay any attention to that. And Rashi adds, afilu lekahuna, means she be kosher, and she can marry a Kohen, and we don't have to assume that she engaged in harlotry, and harlotry involves her being in intimacy with people that would ruin her for the kahuna. But we don't take that into consideration. So the case of the shtar, if that was the rumor is that this is a forged document, we wouldn't pay any attention to that. What do you mean then that? Why would Rav Papa say that a shtar reya, a weakened document, you wouldn't be able to collect with it? Ella, rather, the case of the woman must be the osu beitrei v'amri, two men testified liditu tavasinu bisura. This girl or this woman had sought us out for acts of intimacy. Of two men that testify, we're not talking about a mere rumor and murmurings, but two men testify that she sought them out for intimacy. Okay, that's as far as the woman is concerned. Now, the parallel to the case of the shtar, the kavasa. So that, by the way, in this triangle, then we're describing the woman, which would be the case of the source that said a woman mishyosa shemra bialdusa. That means two witnesses testify that she sought these men out for intimacy. So she would lose. She would not be able to receive knas or pitui if she would be raped. So now, what's the parallel to the case of the document? The kavasa hacha the asu beitrei v'amri. Two witnesses come and say. L'didu omar lahu zaifuli. Two witnesses say that the malveh, the lender in this document, he sought us out to forge a document for him. So, since we said by the woman that if she sought them out for isura, for harlotry, she loses her halachic status of virginity regarding collecting knas. So the Rav Papa would then have concluded from that, if two witnesses claim that the lender here, he sought us out for forging for him a document. The Gemara says, but still that doesn't explain things. Bishlama hasam shrichi prutzim. The case of the woman, I can understand that she would lose her knas, ability to collect knas, because there are, just like she sought these men out, there are a lot of loose men out there that would have intimacy in a harlotrous fashion. Elohacha, but here in the case of the shtar, imhu muhsuk kol yisrael mihusuku, if the lender is someone who has gained the status of someone seeking out falsehood and forgeries, does that mean all of the Jewish people are suspect in forging? The Gemara says, Hachanami, here too, in the case of the document, came into Komahadir Azyufa, since he's been proven by the two witnesses to be an individual seeking out forgery, Eimar ziyufi zayev v'kosav. We'll conclude that he himself, even if you correctly say that all of the rest of the Jewish people are not suspect in forging, but once he has demonstrated his interest in having a forged document, we will assume that he himself learned how to forge signatures and prepare a forged document. So just like the source, as we interpret it with the second triangle, two men claimed that she had sought them out for harlotry, Rav Papa is able to conclude a document concerning which witnesses, two men will say that the lender in this document sought us out for forgery. It is probably a document that the lender himself forged, and therefore we wouldn't enable him, the lender whose name appears in the shtar, to collect with it. On the side, we have under the nosei, the topic heading, we wrote the Bamishna Rishima Shel Noshim She'en Knas. We'll see a list of women that would not generate a knas payment. The Mishnah, the Elu She'en Lohen Knas. The following women, if they would be raped, they would not generate a knas 50 shekel kesef payment on the part of the rapist. Habo al hagiores v'al shvuya v'al shivcha sheniftu v'shenizgairu v'shenishtachru yuseros al benois sholoshonim v'yom echad. A giores is a convert, shvuya a woman who had been taken into captivity, and a shivcha a bondmaid. Sheniftu means redeemed. That's parallel to the number 2 in the opening list that was redeemed, and Nisgairu, that is number 1, converted. And Shishtachru is a bondmaid who is set free, who receives her freedom. If these took place, Yiseros al b'nai sholosham v'yemechad, above 3 years and a day in age. So let's take one example. A girl was converted over 3 years and a day. In the event that a girl like that would be raped, so the rapist would not have to pay a fine of 50 shekel kesef on the grounds that she's not viewed anymore as a virgin. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shvuya Shenifte Sarehi B'Kedushasa. Regarding number 2, Rabbi Yehuda takes exception, and he says that a girl who was taken into captivity and redeemed, she maintains her original sanctity, and if she would be raped, there would be a knas payment. Afapi Shigdola, even though she is already a gedola, she's certainly, even if she's over 3 years of age, that she was released from captivity, she would still be entitled to a knas payment. Habo al bito val bas bito val bas beno, one who has rapes his daughter or his granddaughter, al bas ishto, al bas beno, al bas bito, or his wife's daughter, or wife's granddaughters. Ein lohen knas. There is no knas payment. B'nei shemischayev b'nafsho shemisoson bidei bezdin. There is no knas payment because for that very act he is now guilty of capital punishment, which is carried out by the court. Which is very simply stated, court execution. And anyone who is guilty of court execution does not pay financial penalties. Shenemar, the Pasuk says that v'imlo ye'ason, the Pasuk, without getting into the background right now, we've discussed this Pasuk very often in the past, but the Pasuk is saying if there is no death, then there is onosh yenesh, then there is a financial penalty that must be paid. leaving us to conclude that if there would be a case of death, if there would be a case of murder, which is a capital offense, then we would not say on no shionesh, then there would be no payment made. The topic heading on the side under the nosei mivneh heading, you see a diamond is featured. Machlokis Rabbi Yochanan v'Rabba. Here we see Rabbi Yochanan. A few lines later, Rabba appears in the diamond. Im yesh lomar de Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Doisa Omru Dover Echad. We have two Tanoim. Rabbi Yehuda, we saw in the Mishnah regarding the Shvuya, and Rabbi Dosa is another Tana whose name will appear in a Tanaic source, who also addresses the issue of a Shvuya regarding a different topic. Should we say that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Dosa agreed? They say the same thing. The Shvuya, if they speak to Shosa Kaima, that a captive Jewish woman who is redeemed is said to retain her Jewish sanctity, which means, we didn't explain this before, but it means that she had not had intimacy with the Gentile captors. The Gemara. Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Doisam Rudavar Echad. These two Tanoim say in effect the same thing. Rabbi Yehuda Adamoran, we have a little arrow to the immediate right-hand side of the Gemara. You can see pointing to the line where Rabbi Yehuda appeared above, where Rabbi Yehuda said that a shvuya, a captive woman that is redeemed, she is said to have retained her sanctity and not been party to intimacy with the captors. And if she is raped, so she would receive the knas payment would be made. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Dosa Desanya. We have a Tanaic source now. Shvuya oicheles betruma divrei Rabbi Dosa. Shvuya, a woman who had been in captivity, if she was, let's say, a bas kohen, she is able to continue eating truma. Truma is the tithe given to kohanim. A girl who had experienced forbidden intimacy with, for example, we say forbidden intimacy, will make reference specifically to intimacy with a Gentile, that would disqualify her from continued truma eating. So this source has Rabbi Dosa telling us that a shvuah is cheles b'truma. Divrei Rabbi Dosa, Amar Rabbi Dosa, v'chima asalo Aravi haloz. Aravi is an Arab representative of the captors, the Gentile captor, because he fondled her, he touched her in we'll say private parts. Does that mean poslim and akahuna? Miechla ben dodel literally means he fondled her between her breasts, but it's representative of maltreatment, but not actual intimacy. Just because the captor engaged in that type of mistreatment, does that render her unfit to the kuna? No, absolutely not. And the point is that it's true that captors will treat their captive women lightly, but they only do that for superficial fun, but they won't actually. We are not going to assume that they actually go all the way in intimacy with their captive women. So, what is Rabbi Dosa saying? He's saying that the captive woman is not suspect of having been the victim of intimacy with the Gentile captors. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah said as well. Omar Rabba. And here we have Rabba with a long marking. Rabba says, Dilma Lohi, maybe this parallel is not really so. Ad kan lokama Rabbi Yehuda hacha. Rabbi Yehuda's point in the Mishnah that b'kedusha kaima, and as a result of that, an eventual rapist will have to pay knas. Elo shelo yechote niskar. The fact that the rapist has to pay knas, and knas, as we said before, is indicative of his having raped a virgin. But the Gemara is saying now, it doesn't mean, the fact that he'll have to pay doesn't mean that we're viewing her as an actual virgin, but we want him to pay because we don't want a sinner is a person who commits an act of rape, we don't want him to get off scot-free, we don't want him to benefit, Niskar, we don't want him to profit, meaning to save himself the 50 shekel kesef. So that Rabbi Yehuda's point in the Mishnah of the Shvuya Sheniftes HaRav Yehonasan, which in effect meant that this girl eventually, if she's raped, the rapist will have to pay. He has to pay because we don't want him having committed a rape without having to pay for it. But that's not a sure sign that she has really retained her virginity. After all, she was in captivity with Gentiles. So Avol Hasan, but regarding Truma Karabonon Svirole, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda will hold like the Rabbonon, the other opinions that disagree with Rabbi Dosa, and she'll be considered Becheskas Be'ula. She'll be considered having the status of yes, having had intimacy, thereby disqualifying her from the Truma. Inami, alternatively, or we could say additionally, Ad Kan Lo Kam Rabbi Dosa Hasam. Likewise, to say that Rabbi Dosa would necessarily agree with Rabbi Yehuda, not so. It could be that up till this point, Rabbi Dosa says what he does, that the Shvuya can eat Truma, Ela B'Truma D'Rabbanan. Where you're dealing with Truma nowadays, Rashi adds Truma B'Zman Hazeh, which is rabbinic. Even if she was actually involved with intimacy, the problem of her eating truma nowadays would only be rabbinic. So in the case of a captive woman where we're not sure she had intimacy, it's a suffix, it's a matter of doubt. So the rabbis did not impose their rabbinic restriction in a case of doubt. So Rabbi Dosa said she can continue eating truma, which is the Rabbanan. Aval knas, but the payment of knas, which is deoraisa, and Rashi adds importantly, it involves our removing money from someone's possession, from the rapist's possession. It's called apuki mamona. To remove money, to extricate money, to collect money from someone. Knas, which is in order to do that, you'll have to, we will categorize knas in the realm of something that's Torah-based, kirabonon svirolei. The opinion of Rabbi Dosa would reflect the opinion of the Rabbanon regarding knas. Not like Rabbi Yehuda, but like the Rabbanon in the Mishnah that said that there is no knas. We don't have the right to extricate payment from someone in the case of doubt. Even though it's a matter of doubt, we can't take money. We can't collect money from him. It's something that's rabbinic, so the rabbis can legislate when their rules apply and when they don't. But when you're dealing with something that's of a Torah origin, we have to go according to the rules, and you can't extricate money, financial payment, when there's a matter of doubt. We continue now with a question. In other words, till now, Rabbah made his point against Rabbi Yochanan that you can't parallel Rabbi Yehuda with Rabbi Dosa. Now Abaye asks on a point that Rabbah made, and the question lasts a few lines. Rabbah had said that Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah that said B'Kedusha Kaima is a function not of her being an actual Basula, remaining a virgin, but rather it's more from our interest on the rapist side of things, of making him pay. Omar le Abaye, but Taima de Rabbi Yehuda b'Hocha. Rabbi Yehuda here in the Mishnah is Shlei Chote Niskaru. Is that really his reason? And not something that's because of the basic law. V'Hatanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shvuya Shenishbeis Harei Hi B'Kedushasa. She retains her sanctity. Afilu bas eser shonim Kesubos Masayim. Even if she had been in captivity at age 10, when she eventually gets married, she is entitled to a full-fledged ksuba, financial guarantee from her husband. What the sinner is involved over? There's no issue of sinning in there. and yet by the fact that she's getting a full ksuba of 200 zuz, that shows that she's viewed as a basula, regardless of any chote niskar considerations. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda is not based. Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah regarding the shvuya and the knas payment, and the knas that has to be paid, is something coming from what we call ikar hadin, not because of our stringency against the sinner. The Gemara says, not so. The fact that you see 200 zuz paid over here is again not a reflection of our certainty that she is a virgin, but rather hasam nami dilmo mimni velo nasvi law. It's a rabbinic intervention that we say, listen, we want her to receive a ksuba of 200 zuz because otherwise people are not going to want to marry her. So as we said, just to reiterate, the position of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah and the position of Rabbi Yehuda here regarding the Ksuba Masayim, in the case of the Shvuya, is not a reflection of her being a definite virgin. It's not a reflection of our certainty that she was not defiled. The Gemara continues with a question. It's a long question. We also have another marking. On the side, the double underline under the Mivneh heading is featured. Havlotas, we're going to highlight the Sover, Rabbi Yehuda, etc. The Gemara, you're going to see this type of question, Signon She'ela Shemofia Pamayim. This style question appears twice. You'll see it, and we've marked it off number 1. You see a little 1 on the immediate left-hand side of the Gemara text, and on the top line of Lamed Zayin Aleph, there is a number 2. So the Gemara asks, V'sava Rabbi Yehuda b'kedushasa kaima. Would Rabbi Yehuda say that a shvuya retains her kedusha? And we're going to add over here that by saying she retains her kedusha, so we would allow her to marry a Kohen. Would Rabbi Yehuda say such a thing? V'hatanya hapoidis hashvuya isa'ena. One who redeems a captive woman, so he's entitled to marry her. Meid ba lo yisa'ena. If he is a witness, and the thinking right now is that we're talking about the one who redeemed her. If he serves as a witness, and he happens to be a Kohen, and he's testifying that she was not defiled, lo yisa'ena, he cannot marry her. This source, by the way, the Gemara will point out, is fraught with difficulties. In other words, the reliability of this source is going to be brought into question, but we'll see that later in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, bein kach ubein kach lo yisa'ena. Whether he's redeemed her, or he's testifying about her purity, this guy cannot marry her. If he's a Kohen, he cannot marry her. So we seem to have a problem. Originally, we said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, b'kedushasa kaima, she retains her sanctity, and by saying she retains her sanctity, we assume that means she can marry a Kohen. On the other hand, in this source, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that a Kohen cannot marry her. So let us skip the bracketed section, just a couple of lines, which brings us to the third wide line. Omar Rav Papa, Amo say thusly, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, bein kach ubein kach isa'ena. He is able to marry her, making that consistent with Rabbi Yehuda having said regarding the shvuya, b'kedushasa kaima, that he, the Kohen, is allowed to marry her. Now we'll go over that again, but first we go back to the bracketed section. Ha gufa kashias. We read this Tanaic source. We find that it's inherently contradictory. Amris, you said on the one hand, apoida es hashvuya saena, that the one who redeems the captive woman, he and of course we're assuming that we're talking about a Kohen, that a Kohen who in general is not allowed to marry a woman who was party to intimacy with a Gentile. Here we're talking about a woman that had been in captivity with Gentiles. If she is redeemed and you're a Kohen, so the beginning of the source said, Yisayna, he can marry her. And then you said, Meid ba lo Yisayna. Mishum de Meid ba lo Yisayna. Because he testified about her fidelity or her sanctity, he shouldn't be allowed to marry her. But you said just a moment ago, if he redeemed her, he's able to marry her. Ha lo kashya. The resha of this source, the beginning of the source, really is not a difficulty. Hachi komar. Let us read it as follows. Ha poide es hashvuya umeid ba isaena. A person who put out money to redeem her, and he testifies that she had not been in intimacy with the Gentile captors, and he's a Kohen, he's allowed to marry her. And Rashi explains, if he wasn't sure of her purity, he wouldn't have laid out the money. In context, it's he redeemed her in order to be able to marry her. So he wouldn't have laid out the money to marry a woman that would be forbidden to him. Meid ba kidi, if we have a case of someone who did not lay out any money, simply testified that she remained pure, did not have intimacy with the captors, lo yisayna. There, we don't allow him to marry. We're suspect, as Rashi says, Shema ein of nosam, maybe he's simply overcome with desire. But we don't say that when a guy is laying out money as well. Mikol Mokon, Kashil Rabbi Yehuda. We still have the problem with regard to Rabbi Yehuda, because in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said that the Shvuya is B'Kedushasa, and here in this source we have Rabbi Yehuda saying, Lo Yisan, he cannot marry her. Omar Rav Papa Ema. So Rav Papa says you have to restate this Tanaic source to say as follows: Rabbi Yehuda Omer Beinkach Ubeinkach Yisaena. Whether he's laid out money or he merely testified, he is allowed to marry her, because we assume she was not party to intimacy with the captors. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua Meliolam Ke De Katani. Rav Huna says keep the original source with Rabbi Yehuda saying Lo Yisana as is. Rabbi Yehuda L'Divreim De Rabbanan Karmelu. Rabbi Yehuda, when he says in the source Lo Yisana, is speaking according to the Rabbanan, meaning he's not reflecting his own opinion. And it's to be understood as follows: L'Didi, personally, Beinkach U'Beinkach Yisa'ena. Either way, whether he's a person who laid out money or he testifies about her purity, and he's a Kohen, he's allowed to marry her because she retains her Kedusha. El Didhu, but according to you, Beinkach U'Beinkach Lo Yisa'ena Mibayel. You should have been consistent in saying that he should not be allowed to marry her. Now, when we read the original source, it said that if he redeems her, so he can, according to the Rabbanan again, if he redeems her, he can marry her. If he testifies about her, he cannot marry her. The Rabbanan respond: Hapoida is a shvu meyed ba yisana. If he does both, he redeems her and testifies about her purity, he is allowed to marry her. And the reason, lo shodi in zuzi b'chti, as we saw before and we explained before when we noted Rashi, a person would not throw out his money, wouldn't spend his money for nothing. If he's laying out money, backing up his claim that she is fit for me, so he must know a thing or two, and he's sure that she is still pure. He wouldn't. Lo shodi zuzi. Lo shodi means to throw out. Inish zuzi, people wouldn't throw out their zuzi, their money b'chti, for nothing. Meyed ba kedi lo yisana. But if he merely testified without laying out money, he can't marry her. Shema inov no samba. Maybe he's simply overcome with desire. His eyes desire her, meaning he's overcome with desire, but it's not indicative of certain purity, and as a Kohen, he cannot marry her. That's the opinion of the Rabbanan. Rami lay Rav Papa bar Shmuel Rav Yosef. Rav Papa raises a problem to Rav Yosef, and we continue at the top of Lamed Zayin. V'sava Rabbi Yehuda b'kedusha kaima. Does Rabbi Yehuda hold that the shvuya is still in a state of sanctity, of purity? V'hatanya. We have a Tanaic source. There's markings that you should pay attention to. The source says Hagioresh is Gaira, a girl that converted. The Roa Sodam, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Daya Shaita. When she sees blood after she converted, this source is referring to laws that have to do with Nida, a menstruant woman, and her ability or lack thereof of defiling things she touches once she experiences dam. So Rabbi Yehuda says that the Gioris that converted, and right after her conversion, she sees a blood flow, menstrual appearance. Rabbi Yehuda says, Daya Shaita, it's enough that we are metama things from this point onwards. There's no retroactive defilement. And I know that we're saying things that might sound abstract or a little difficult, because this is a very an extensive topic in Maseches Nida, where there are other opinions regarding the defilement that we impose upon things she touched. So according to this opinion, when she sees the blood, from that point she imposes defilement on fruits, vegetables, on items that she touches. Things that otherwise would not have been defiled. Now, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Harehi Kechol Hanoshim, she is like any regular Jewish woman. Umetama Meisleis Umepkida Lebkida. There is retroactive tuma. Now, here again, we're not getting into details because it's a bit off the topic. But Meisleis means a retroactive tuma of 24 hours. Mepkida means if she checked herself now and had checked herself at some point in time earlier, the last time that she checked herself and found herself to be clean, meaning no blood on the checking cloth that women use to determine whether or not they're experiencing any blood sighting. So we assume that from immediately after her last checking, the blood started flowing, as she sees right now. So there would be retroactive tumah back to prior to the last previous checking. Truth be told, that all of that is side information. So if anyone feels that we didn't give a sufficiently clear explanation, don't worry about it. That is really for Maseches Nida. But here we have to pay closer attention. A woman who converts, she cannot marry immediately. She has to wait 3 months in order for us to determine whether or not she's pregnant. Rabbi Yossi Mati Leoros V'Leosim Miyad. Rabbi Yossi says she can enter Erusin and Nisuin immediately. We're not suspicious of her having been impregnated. Well, what do we see over here? We see that the Gyoras, we assume that there was impregnation from the guy. So how can you say in the Mishnah that the woman taken captive, there was no intimacy? Here we see that we do suspect intimacy. Omar lei. So Rav Sheshes, to whom this problem had been, or I should say Rav Yosef, to whom this problem had been presented, Rav Yosef responds, what kind of question are you asking? Yores hashvuya karamis. You're raising a challenge to Rabbi Yehuda's position on shvuya from a topic of gioras, of conversion. Giores lo mintera nafsha. A woman who converts, she wasn't careful about herself before the conversion. And before she converted, we assume that she had relations with Gentile men, and now when she marries we're not going to let her marry a Jewish man until we wait 3 months till after the conversion to determine whether or not she is pregnant or not. If she's pregnant with a child from the Gentile husband or the Gentile contact, or not. So that's as far as a gior. She doesn't guard herself. She doesn't keep herself away from intimacy. Therefore, she has to wait 3 months after the conversion before we let her get married. Shvuya, a Jewish woman that's taken into captivity, mintara nafsha. She's very careful. She watches herself. She's careful to avoid intimacy. So that with the case of the shiur, there's a built-in guarding factor that can lead Rabbi Yehuda to say that she remains b'kedushasa. She remains in her sanctity. The Gemara asks, "V'romi shvuya shvuya." Okay, so the issue between gioras versus shvuya, that's a non-starter. But there's a problem regarding within the topic of captive women. We're now going to present a contradiction. The case of shvuya in the Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, was b'kedushasa. And now we see a source which will seem to indicate otherwise. Desanya hagiyores v'shvuya v'shivcha. We have a list of women, but we underline shvuya because that's our immediate concern. Sheniftu v'shenizgairu v'shenishtachru yiseres albonos shel ishanim v'yom. If they were, let's say, redeemed from the captivity above 3 years of age, tzrichas lamtin gimel chadoshim divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This girl, immediately after her redemption from captivity, if she wants to get married, we're going to say you have to wait 3 months. And this is Rabbi Yehuda speaking. Rabbi Yossi mati loros v'losim miyad. Rabbi Yossi says she can enter into a marital bond and consummate the marriage immediately. But we focus on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda and shvuya. In the Mishnah, we saw Rabbi Yehuda saying shvuya b'kedushasa kaima. She is not suspect of having any intimacy. Here, the shvuya, after her release from captivity, she wants to marry. She's got to wait 3 months because we do suspect that she had intimacy with the captors. This is a problem, ishtik. So Rav Yosef was silenced by this question. Omarle midi shmielach b'ho. So he was then asked, "Do you have any tradition on this? Did you hear anything about this?" Omarle hachi amar Rav Sheshes. I'll tell you what Rav Sheshes says about this. Shirauha shenivala. The case here that we have to insist on waiting 3 months. It's where she was seen to have had actual intimacy. It's no longer a case of just suspected intimacy. And there, Rabbi Yehuda says, well, we don't suspect. Here we're talking about we know she was seen having had intimacy. Therefore, she has to wait 3 months before she can, in order for us to determine whether she was impregnated by that or not. My time with Rabbi Yossi, if she was seen having an act of intimacy, so why would Rabbi Yossi allow her to marry immediately? Well, she's going to marry immediately. 7 months later, she might have a child. Who says that the child is from her husband? It might be from the child from the captors. It's a Gentile father. And we want to know. It's very important for us to be sure of who the father is. How can Rabbi Yossi, therefore, if we saw her have an act of intimacy while in captivity, how can we allow her to marry immediately? You'll notice a house marking that appears on the side. We have a nosei mivneh heading. These represent Hesberim L'Shitas Rabbi Yossi, explanations of Rabbi Yossi, Dematir Ashvi L'Ros V'Nosim Miyad, that allow her to enter marriage immediately. Isha Mezana, a woman who is involved with, extra or outside of marriage intimacy. Mezana, Isha Mezana, a woman who's involved with a harlotrous experience. Number one, Mishameshes B'moch. One approach is to say that she uses a type of contraceptive. Moch is a piece of highly absorbent, soft fabric that she inserts into her female anatomy at that point, which would absorb any male seed, thereby preventing her from becoming impregnated. Number 2, mishapeches indicates a woman that immediately after the harlotrous act, or the non-husband-wife relation intimacy, mishapeches, she flips her body around. In other words, she causes the male seed to be released, thereby preventing pregnancy from setting in. So we go back to our Gemara. If we're talking about a case of intimacy on the part of the captive woman that was witnessed, that was seen, why does Rabbi Yossi allow her to enter marriage immediately? Why doesn't he take into consideration the possibility of her having been impregnated? Omar Rabba, Kosover Rabbi Yossi holds Isha Mizana Meshameshes B'moich Shelo Tisaber, a woman who is involved with a znus, a harlotrous act of intimacy, uses a moch. We'll call it a contraceptive, in order shelo tisaber, so that she does not become impregnated. Now, so that is then supposedly Rabbi Yossi's opinion in the source that we read above. Now, in the source that we read above, a number of different cases were featured. We didn't focus on them because we didn't need to at the time. But now we look back at the framed section where you saw Hagiyores at the last word of the line, the beginning of that source, the most recent Tanaic source. There were 3 women listed. Giyores, Shvuya, Shifcha. A Shifcha is a bondmaid that she can be released from her servitude by her being let's say buying her freedom out. Or let's say if the owner can decide to free her, an owner makes the decision. There's also another possibility of one of her limbs being knocked out, her eye, her tooth being knocked out, and she would instantly go free. And when we speak about a bondmaid going free, it means she becomes a full-fledged Jew. Let's now continue with the Gemara. We raise a question. It's a long question. Bishlama Giyores. I can understand Rabbi Yossi's approach to the convert woman. Kiva the Daita Liguri, since it's on her mind to convert. So Mintara Nafsha. She's careful not to have intimacy with Gentiles. She's planning a conversion, and therefore Rabbi Yossi can afford to let her immediately marry after her conversion. Shvuya nami de lo yoda hecha mamtula. The shvuya is also in a state of uncertainty. She doesn't know where she'll be, where the captors will take her to sell her, and she's figuring she might be taken to a place where there are Jewish people that will redeem her, and she therefore is careful to use a moch, and that you can see in Rashi. So the shvuya also, we can understand Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Shifcha nami, the bondmaid, deshama mipi mora, she hears that her master is considering her release, and therefore will be careful not to have relations with other men, which is generally speaking by characteristic of the bondmaid slave lifestyle. But this particular shifcha hears her master is planning her to release her, so she'll be careful not to become impregnated. The bondmaid who experiences the loss of a tooth or an eye because her master knocked it out, which the Torah provides for her immediate freedom and thereby becoming Jewish. How is it that regarding that case of shivcha, it's a form of shivcha shenishtakra. Shichur hashivcha is the freeing of the shivcha through this method. What are you going to say about that? Up till that point, she didn't know that she was going to be released, and she was leading the loose shivcha lifestyle. You might say that, in fact, when things happen memela, without planning, they happen immediately. So Rabbi Yossi did not present his lenient opinion. Hare anusa mefuta de memela, case of a woman who's raped or seduced, which are things that are not planned. Rabbi Yossi Matir, we're focusing on Rabbi Yossi. He says he's allowing they can enter marriage immediately. And even though over there also, isn't there a suspicion that she's been impregnated by the rapist? And wouldn't we want to know who the father is? And yet Rabbi Yossi doesn't seem to be concerned with that. So how do you explain Rabbi Yossi's allowance with regard to these situations of we'll call it immediate change of events, and he allows immediate marriage? To suggest that she takes precautionary measures is not something we can say in these cases of the shifcha that's yetze b'shein v'ayin, nor in the case of the anus or mefuta. What precautionary measures, the contraceptive moch thing, how would you explain it over here? Ela Omar Rabba, a second approach to Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi Isha Mizana, a woman who's involved with harlotrous type relations, intimacy, misapeches, she flips over immediately after the act. She'll jerk her body, she'll flip over, kedei shelo tisaber, to prevent her from becoming impregnated. So she's not impregnated. She hasn't been impregnated, even though she had intimacy with all these different kind of possibilities we mentioned above. We can let her marry, and the husband, upon a birth, 7 months later or 9 months later, the husband can be sure that this is his own child. V'idach Rabbi Yehuda, who seemed to be hesitant. Why does he not agree with Rabbi Yossi? Chayshinon shema lo nevcha yafa yafa. Rabbi Yehuda is suspicious that maybe the flipping over isn't done sufficiently well, and therefore there is the suspicion of pregnancy. So Rabbi Yehuda takes into the consideration the possibility that the flipping over was not reliable enough, a means of preventing the pregnancy.